Remember that time that we bought a 1980s fixer-upper and renovated it for $70,000 in 14 months while a worldwide pandemic was going on and we were still working full-time?
Yeah, that was crazy.
I remember walking into this house and getting the feeling of an era long past. Looking through the darkness, I could see the small kitchen with those classic laminate counters over nasty particle board cabinets, gappy linoleum floor tiles, and the once cheerful but now drab wallflowers.
The layout of this U-shaped kitchen was actually decent for its size, since the placement of the stove, sink, and refrigerator made for the bodacious cooking trifecta. But the smell of cat urine, the sound of slamming cabinet doors, and the dim fluorescent yellow lights dulled the chance of any creative cooking spark.
The kitchen is the heart of any house, and as such, it deserves a considerable amount of thinking to go towards it. But the eagerness to get going was too much to bear, and so we got started with the one thing we just couldn't keep, and that was the flooring. The flooring wasn't so eager to leave though, so we had to fight our way through that glue with pry bars, scrapers, and 100% genuine muscle.
Kitchen design can quickly eat up any size budget, and ours was small to begin with. We began forming the design by choosing what we would keep and what would be replaced. The first sacrifice we made were the cabinets above the stove. This tiny kitchen felt cramped with upper cabinets on both sides, so away they went.
And now that the wall was bare, it seemed obvious that tiles really needed to be up there. To give the tiles a better backing, we opted to remove the floral print vinyl over gypsum wall panels and replace them with backerboard later. And if you're going to put tiles on one wall, why not do all the walls, right? That's what we were thinking.
So down all the VOG came, and with all that gone, something new stood out, that bulkhead. This big box holding nothing but a nasty old fluorescent troffer light above the sink. We thought it must be this big because it's hiding something else, right? So we popped that ugly light out of there, and what did we find inside? Nothing but a bunch of old-ass wasp nests. Gross.
In our living room, we decided to put those wafer lights in the ceiling, and since we bought a multi-pack of lights that had a few extra fixtures than we needed, we thought this area above the sink would be a perfect place to use those extras.
And just like the laundry room, where we had giant holes in the walls, this bulkhead was another place where it just made sense to remove all the VOG and replace the whole area with drywall. But before we closed it up, we covered up a bunch of gaping hole cracks open to Mother Nature with plywood, as well as installed the Romex and screwed the wafer light boxes securely to the framing.
While we had the walls open, we also wanted to move the outlet for the range hood, add Romex for under cabinet lighting, and install any blocking for, say, floating shelves. We looked at a bunch of floating shelf hardware, but eventually we got sold on the idea of using pipes threaded into flanges, screwed into the frame. We calculated out where all the shelves would be and then installed our pipes. Before we closed up the wall, we made sure we could get our 2x10 lumber with matching holes into the pipes, and last, of course, was to hang from the pipes and make sure they could hold at least 100 pounds. Which they did no problem.
Once we had all the work done within the walls, it was time to close them up with backerboard. We took our time measuring for all the outlets, switches, and our wall pipes. Once we had all the walls closed up, we could start prepping for paint. So we took off all the cabinet doors with their hinges and began the underappreciated but oh so important step of patching and caulking. Every gap filled, no hole left open.
Now it was paint time. We started with priming the cabinets, where we used the expensive Zinsser bin because that is a shellac-based primer that seals in odors and stains, since this whole place smelled like cats. That was followed up with the more affordable Zinsser 123 primer on the walls, and we covered up all that 80s VOG. Then we could spray on our white base coat. We painted one coat of semi-gloss on the ceiling and 2 coats on the walls. Then we rolled on 1 coat of the same paint, but in a matte sheen. The lower sheen helps diffuse light and makes for a softer appearance, but it's harder to maintain, so we reserved it for just the ceilings.
Next, we could mask off the walls and spray the cabinets. We went with a darker gray for the lower cabinets and a light gray for the uppers. Since this is a compact kitchen, we wanted the room to feel less cramped, and so by lightening the upper cabinets, we can reduce some of that visual pressure at eye level, making the room feel more spacious.
Once the paint was dry, we could finally remove all that plastic and get that satisfaction from effortlessly peeling masking tape away to reveal that gorgeous transition.
Oh, ruined it.
So smooth.
I ruined it.
To prepare for our next steps, we really could have used a little more light, so we made a little detour down Waferlight Lane. We threw on the hole saw, aimed the thing at the thing, pulled the trigger, and popped those bad boys up in that wasp-free bulkhead.
And now that we could properly see, we were all ready to work on these countertops, except for the fact that the sink needed to be gone. So we unscrewed the plumbing P-trap, loosened the clips holding the sink from the bottom, broke the silicone seal from around the sink, and out it came. Now we could get started on the countertops.
That's not fair! Just like the bathrooms, we planned to one day do a complete renovation of this kitchen. But since these counters were in surprisingly good shape, we are going to cover them with the same vinyl and epoxy treatment we did on the bathroom counters. We started with a good cleaning and then planned out the vinyl cuts. I used soapy water to lubricate the surface, which allowed me to easily position the vinyl. Once I started squeegeeing the water out, the vinyl would stay in place. Since these counters were flat, applying the vinyl was much easier than the bathroom, and we used the same heat gun technique to stretch the vinyl around the edges. We glued the edges for some extra insurance and trimmed off the excess. Once the vinyl was down, we popped all the air bubbles with an X-Acto knife and prepped the surface with primer. We chose an epoxy specifically designed for countertops. It's food safe and formulated for pouring thin flood coats. We placed the unmixed epoxy by our heater vents to warm it up for a couple hours, which makes it less viscous. Then we thoroughly mixed the two parts. After the two parts were turned into one, we transferred that to another bucket, mixed again, and they became super duper together. Our epoxy clock was officially ticking, and we poured our mixture all over our primed vinyl. I spread it with our notch trowel, trying to get as even a layer as I could on the top of the counters. The manufacturer then suggests using a stipple brush technique, so I did as I was instructed and stabbed the shit out of our epoxy. Even though this made a bunch of warblies on the surface, you can see how the blowtorch helps level it back out quickly. I swiped the flame over the epoxy to pop air bubbles as they rose to the surface, which I did repeatedly for the next couple hours. After I had the tops of the counters nicely covered, I painted epoxy onto the sides and bottoms because even though it's a flood coat, it needs encouragement for going over the edge. In between using the blowtorch, I used a spatula to scrape off drips on the underside of the counters. We made sure the plastic was long enough to cover the floor because there was a lot of drippage. Once it was cured, we gave it a light sanding and repeated the process one more time. Then, we waited the recommended number of cure hours listed by the manufacturer.
It's intermission. Rise and stretch time.
With the final coat cured, we could do our finish sanding to give this epoxy the sheen we wanted. Working from 80 grit up to a wet 400 grit gave the epoxy a buttery texture while removing visible sanding marks.
With the countertops done, we could finally move on to the most exciting / terrifying part, tiling. We started with adhesive mesh tape to hold those backerboard seams together, and then mortared down that tape in our pipe flanges. Those flanges are there forever now. Since there was water damage on the old window returns, we replaced them with vinyl. We spent many minutes measuring twice and cutting our tile edge trim once to make sure that every piece fit perfectly. Once we had that done, we could apply our first dollop of tile mortar ever. The edging was set in place, and then we could put on our first tile sheet. Since our kitchen was a bay window, we centered our pattern over the window and started from the middle. As we worked across the window and started coming down the side, we could see that our mortar was not as stiff as we had hoped. I decided to go up from the bottom and placed tile spacers in between every tile to hold those sheets up. When we got to the obtuse corner, we cut our tile sheets in such a way that the pattern would continue around the corner, and we made sure to line up the pattern as best we could. By the time we worked our way around the stove wall, we were very aware that maintaining the uniformity of the pattern would be a challenge. We worked our way up the wall, but this time, the tiles were not only sagging, but the pattern was also getting offset. We had to rip 2 tile sheets down, and when we put them back up, we forced the pattern back into alignment using tile spacers. We washed the wall and the tiles and came back with another lesson learned. As we worked our way up the wall for the second time, we were very mindful of the pattern, the sagging, and making sure globs of mortar weren't between the tiles. It worked well for us to have one person installing the tiles and another person following up to check for gaps, clean out joints, and wipe away unused mortar. The end result was nice, even, and clean. The next day, we could remove all the spacers and didn't have to do much cleanup since we had done that while we were tiling. We pushed that grout into all those perfectly spaced gaps, making sure to swipe that float in every direction known to man. Every gap was filled except the edges where there was an adjacent ceiling, cabinet, or counter. The best part was definitely wiping away the excess grout with our giant sponge to reveal the final result. After the grout had some time to dry, we came back with our sponge one last time to wipe off all that haze. Before siliconing around the edges, I took the time to mask both sides of the joints because I'm a freak and I like things done cleanly. Then I could squish that silicone in there and wipe it away with my favorite squeegee thingy. We removed the tape and boom. Beautiful caulk job. If you're into that sort of thing, that is.
The last thing to do was to seal the grout, and it was time to officially start putting this kitchen back together. We bought a single basin stainless steel sink, and since we had a double basin before, we had to reroute the plumbing.
What are you working on?
Plumbing the sink.
You're doing a good job.
We installed the new sink and faucet, range hood, stuck down fresh vinyl in all the cabinet and drawer bottoms, reinstalled the cabinet doors and their new hardware, pushed the fridge back into its home, installed the new dishwasher, shoved the floating shelves onto their sturdy wall pipes, and put in some new light fixtures.
Renovating a kitchen can be intimidating since it's usually the most expensive room to renovate. We knew the cabinets and counters were dated, but with some minor repairs, fresh paint, modern hardware, and a new countertop finish, we can really transform them into something completely different.
Lighting is one of the most important things in a kitchen, and these dingy fluorescent lights just weren't cutting it.
How does that buzzing sound to you?
Buzzy.
The devil.
By adding not only new pendant lights, but also 3 wafers above the sink and under cabinet lighting, you can clearly see in this space, which is a good thing when wielding sharp knives.
Improving the lighting and replacing those upper cabinets with floating shelves really made this space open up and feel more inviting. When we win the lottery or those appliances die, we will definitely be replacing them with stainless steel ones. Despite the fact that functionally the kitchen didn't change much, we can truly say we think the kitchen feels like it got an upgrade, especially after cooking on a hot plate in the bathroom. What is the upgrade you want in your kitchen most, and why?
There are many ways to renovate a kitchen, but this is just our 2 cents on how we turned an 80s kitchen into a Farmhouse Modern kitchen.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye!
Next, we shall renovate the exterior of the house in the middle of summer because we are horrible planners.